you or me, private homeowners, are we at risk of losing our homes?
So I think the fear really that has been going around is unfounded. As I say, it's a tool that has always been available to our government, to governments around the world. And the government is not specifically looking for properties to take. What it is allowing government to do is, if there is a project that is in the public interest, an area that has expanded rapidly and now a hospital needs to be built, a national road needs to be built. The Gautrain was a good example. There was a need for that.
Absolutely.
Then government will identify what land is needed, and then we'll start looking at who owns that land.
And then follow all these steps so there's no risk that overnight you suddenly don't own a home. Hi, I'm Carol Reynolds and welcome to the Property Pod. Today I'm going to be talking about the Expropriation Act, and joining me to unpack this new legislation is Sarah Araujo from Araujo Attorneys, one of KZN's leading conveyancing practices. Hi Sarah, welcome. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you, Carol, for having me on your property flight.
Oh, it's lovely to have you. So Sarah, I just love your story, your little journey to the successful property conveyancer that you are today. Apparently you started working from home when you were starting out, and now you've mushroomed into this amazing legal practice with beautiful offices. So yeah, huge congrats.
Thank you, Carol. I actually really identify with your own Pam Golding.
Yes.
I believe she started from her garage.
She did indeed.
And built a beautiful brand that just stood for excellence and integrity and trust, which is all the things that we stand for.
100%. Well, let's dive straight in. Let's talk about expropriation. So we all know what expropriation is, but maybe you can flesh it out a little bit for us.
Yes, absolutely. So I think expropriation is a hot topic at the moment. It's been on a lot of people's lips, but it's actually been around forever. It's a tool really that governments can use worldwide. It's not just specific to South Africa. It's there in our constitution that the government can, for a public purpose or a public benefit, take land that it needs to flesh out that purpose, be it a dam, a rail, a hospital, or whatnot.
Okay, super. Thanks, Sarah. So the new Act repeals Act 63 of 1975, and it brings expropriation in line with the Constitution, which is surely a really good thing. I mean, if we look at Section 25 of the Constitution, it talks about just and equitable compensation. So I imagine that we are fully protected from this EWC, expropriation without compensation, that everybody's been panicking about.
Yes, I think that's what's rattled all the cages, is there is this wording of nil compensation in this new Act. But as you say, the Constitution, Section 25, deals with expropriation. And in fact, the legislature has actually taken the wording from the Constitution and imported it into this new Act. So it's reiterating what was already there. It does speak about nil compensation, but really the understanding is that that is in very narrow circumstances. Okay. So, for example, where an organ of state, the South African National Defence Force, let's say, has been given a piece of land decades ago to build an army barracks. They have never done that. They never paid for the land in the first place. The government can expropriate that land and take it back and use it for a different purpose, and nil compensation in that scenario could be just and equitable.
Okay, got you. Thanks, Sarah. And it seems that the new Act is very much a procedural act as well. So it sort of governs the process that the government has to follow if they are wanting to expropriate, which also gives comfort because, again, it talks about the government having to approach the relevant parties and to try and reach some sort of reasonable agreement. Again, the test of the reasonable man always brings me comfort.
Absolutely. So it's exactly that. The legislature we've repealed the Act from 1975, and this Act actually gives more checks and balances. It gives procedure to it. It puts into place that a reasonable agreement needs to be reached if it can.
Yes.
Only then you go down the expropriation route.
Okay.
And even then, there's quite strict parameters. The government has to engage with all rights holders. They have to give 30 days notice of wanting to expropriate, tell you what compensation they're going to be paying you. And then you have a chance to then respond to them and either accept it or ask for more information. It can go to mediation or even to court. The government cannot just wield their power and take your property and expropriate.
Well, that's fantastic. That's a relief. So, I mean, let's look at the average man on the street, you or me, private homeowners. Are we at risk of losing our homes?
So I think the fear really that has been going around is unfounded. As I say, it's a tool that has always been available to our government, to governments around the world, and the government is not specifically looking for properties to take. What it is allowing government to do is if there is a project that is in the public interest, an area that has expanded rapidly and now a hospital needs to be built, a national road needs to be built.
Yes.
The Gautrain was a good example.
Yes.
There was a need for that.
Absolutely.
Then government will identify what land is needed and then we'll start looking at who owns that land.
And then follow all these steps so there's no risk that overnight you suddenly don't own a home.
Absolutely. And remember, government actually owns a lot of land itself. And
Yes.
to expropriate is costly. They have
Yeah.
to go through the whole process. They have to offer compensation. So their first prize will be to use their own land. It's only in quite narrow circumstances, again, that they would then look to expropriate.
Oh, fantastic, Sarah. So if we look at property investors who have multiple properties, are they a target?
So certainly not. Again, it would have to be a specific purpose that the government has. They can't arbitrarily deprive you of your land ownership rights. And so the fact that you own more than one property is not a factor that's taken into account.
Oh, fantastic. So even holiday homes that maybe aren't occupied throughout the year with high vacancy rates, is that a factor at all?
So no, I would say in that case as well, that's not a factor. I think that is different from an inner city building that has
Yes.
been legally abandoned by its landlord. In that case, the government could look to repurpose that in the public interest, but very different from a holiday home that you don't frequent as often as you'd like.
Yes. And then in terms of vacant land, are there any risks there? If you own a piece of land and you've been meaning to develop it but just haven't got around to it, are you putting yourself at any risk?
So yes, I would say the Act and the commentary around it does speak about land that is not productive, that has not been developed, and that there are no plans for development. I would say then they are perhaps slightly more susceptible to the government looking at that tract of land for development in the public interest. But again, it would have to be for a very specific purpose. They
Yes.
can't just take it because you haven't developed it.
Yes.
It's not that. They're not looking to do that.
Okay, super. Thank you, Sarah. And then I assume that type of ownership is irrelevant insofar as the Act is concerned. So whether you own in your private capacity or a company or a trust has no bearing.
Absolutely. So if you own in a trust, a company, or individual name, leave those properties as they are. Obviously for estate planning purposes, tax purposes, now that's a different conversation.
Yes, and maybe another podcast.
Another podcast there perhaps.
Yeah. Thanks, Sarah. And then just regarding the banks. So, I mean, most properties in South Africa are financed. So effectively, the banks are very big landowners. What happens if a property is expropriated? If there is just an equitable compensation, but the amount of compensation is less than the mortgage facility and the outstanding bond. So there's a little shortfall on the bond. Will the private person then be liable to the bank for that shortfall, or what happens in that situation?
So no, they wouldn't be. And I think that's a good question because I think that's where a lot of the fear stems.
Yes.
But the Act specifically caters for that situation. And the government is actually obliged to engage with all rights holders. So it doesn't just speak about the owner, it speaks about the bank as the financier. It even goes so far as to say unregistered rights holders on farmlands, if there are people living on that land, they would have to engage with all those people and make sure that those rights are balanced.
Oh, fantastic, Sarah. Well, I must say, you've certainly put my mind at ease. So we can go forth and continue investing in property, which is fantastic. Where can people get hold of you if they want some legal advice or conveyancing advice?
So we are Araujo Attorneys, and we are based in Umhlanga in KZN, in Ballito and in Howick, and we do property transfers across the country.
Oh, super. Thank you so much, Sarah. It's been fabulous having you here with me today. Always nice to catch up.
Thank you, Carol.
And thank you so much for joining us today. So the good news is we can go out and invest in properties as we've always done, because I still believe property is the best investment class, and certainly at the moment with the volatile stock market. So thanks for joining us, and be sure to join our next podcast. We'll see you soon.